There might be a lot of bouncing around in the SEC with Texas and Oklahoma officially becoming members of the 16-team conference. Boy, what a rude welcome Oklahoma gets. They play 6 teams ranked in the preseason poll, 4 of them away from Norman, 4 in the top 11, too. At least they missed Georgia. Mike Elko, one of 3 new head coaches in the SEC. As Nick Saban leaves Alabama, Kalen DeBoer there. Jeff Levy takes over at Mississippi State. Elko coming from Duke to Texas A&M. And in the preseason top 25, Georgia number 1, 46-62 votes. Bama, Ole Miss, Missouri, LSU, Tennessee on the top 15. And Oklahoma and A&M also ranked. In the last 20 years, 2 decades, only twice has the SEC gone consecutive years without winning a national championship. So if you believe that history, they're due. And with the expanded field, used to be the argument, Nick, about whether the SEC would get 2 teams in. It might be a much higher number this time around.
Well, and I think this is my big thing about the way we set up the playoffs. I'm glad we have the playoffs, and I guess politically we had to do it the way we did it to get it where it is. But you have conferences that have the first team ranked number 14. We have 4 or 5 teams ranked before 14. So to get the best teams in, and they're all going to play each other, we cannot put so much emphasis on record. You have to go by quality of opponent, quality wins, strength of schedule, because Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU, Missouri, I mean, all these teams, Oklahoma, they all have a chance to have a good enough season to be in the playoffs, but they're all going to play each other. So somebody's got to lose. So anyway, that's just my pet peeve about getting the best teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, he needs to join you guys on Tuesday nights when you guys do that thing.
Well, next week will be a good discussion to kind of talk about the new playoff and what they're mandating. They want the best teams, and regardless of their.
Well, you look at the additions, right? Texas is, I think, built to play in the SEC. The big thing about Texas is they understood, like, we can beat Oklahoma, but we need to beat the SEC teams. And they built their roster to be able to sustain that level of play in the SEC. So I think that Texas is going to have a measure of success. I still think Georgia's the top dog. Be aware of Missouri. You mentioned Missouri. They had 11 wins a year ago. They bring back Luther Bird, who may be the best receiver in college football, and Brady Cook. And don't forget, when they played Georgia a year ago, Kirby Smart was very complimentary of the way Missouri played. And they beat Ohio State in the bowl game. So this is a team to keep an eye on, the Missouri Tigers.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Brady Cook has a chance to really lead that team some great things. Bird, they're loaded. We've been bracing for this, and now it's here. Texas and Oklahoma. We've been debating who's built for it, who's ready for it, and now we're going to find out. But if you look at the schedules between Oklahoma and Texas, boy, Oklahoma has a grind. Texas has a trip to Ann Arbor on top of going into the SEC, but I think we're all anxious to see how Texas and Oklahoma, their styles of play. I heard you talking yesterday about Oklahoma's very skilled, but do they build in the trenches for the week in and week out pounding that they'll take in that conference? And I think Sark, because of his experience with you, probably ahead of time has built the trenches on both sides to be prepared for this, but time will tell. But I can't wait to see those brands in that conference competing.
I mean, somebody on this table had Texas and Georgia in the SEC championship. I didn't say. Did you say that?
I didn't say that.
Did you say that?
So.
Did you say that? That was this guy. This guy knows more about the SEC than anybody in the history of the SEC, and has Texas making it to the championship, which would be obviously an insane run to come into the Southeastern Conference with how great it always is from top to bottom and be able to make it the whole way. I think the big question for me is obviously Georgia's going to be Georgia, but like Kalen DeBoer coming in to the SEC with the Alabama team, I'm very fascinated. They're still ranked very, very high. Milroe is back yet again. There's some leaders that have stuck around there. With his absence, I'll be excited to see if Alabama remains the team in the SEC.
Well, I think we all, I want to come to you on this. I think we all think Kalen DeBoer is a great coach. We know he's a great coach.
Absolutely.
But stepping into the shadow of Nick Saban, I'm just curious what you think. They have great players. They're going to have a great team. But what is he going to experience being the coach after you there in Tuscaloosa?
Well, all I could tell you is I went and watched last week's scrimmage on Saturday, and that team still has the same culture, they had when I was the coach. They play with toughness. They play with great effort. They execute well. They've got good discipline. So Kalen has done a really good job. He's had to replace some players because so many guys transferred, but I really think Alabama, with Jalen Milroe, the 2 running backs that they have, I was worried about the defense, but I think the defense really impressed me, in this scrimmage, that they have come along. So if they can play the kind of defense, especially in the secondary, because they lost so many players in the secondary, they're going to be right up there challenging people. But I'm going to say something about the SEC and the scheduling. If you look at everybody's schedule, Missouri has the easiest path to get in the championship game. Georgia has one of the toughest paths to get in the championship game. They got to go to Ole Miss. They got to go to Texas. They got to go to Alabama. So it's not all equal in the way these schedules are kind of set up. As hard as people tried to make them that way, it was just difficult with all the changes. So that's going to have something to say about who gets in the championship game. And then is it going to be an advantage to get in the SEC championship game or a disadvantage? We talked about that before too, but I see 6 or 7 teams that have a chance to win this, but somebody has to prove they can beat Georgia. The only people who have beaten Georgia in the last 2 or 3 years is Alabama. So somebody's got to prove that they can beat Georgia.
What about Lane Kiffin this year, right? This feels like the Ole Miss year.
Preseason top 10.
Jackson Dart's
if not now, when?
Yeah, bingo. It feels like this is the year for Ole Miss and for Lane Kiffin to kind of do it. 2 transfers on the defensive line, too, I think, for Texas A&M and Florida, so they beef up that entire thing. Is this the year for Ole Miss? But to your point, schedule, not easy at all down there.